Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Michael Kramer. I'm the president of New Downtown Dems. Tonight, we have the pleasure of meeting with three candidates for the New York State Senate, SD27, who will be competing for the Democratic nomination on August the 23rd. Early voting, I think, starts on the 16th of August. Our three candidates are the incumbent, Brian Kavanaugh. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you.
One of his challengers, Vittoria Fariello. Welcome, Victoria. And another challenger, Daniela Souza Egorov. Welcome, Daniela. So let's start maybe in that order. Could everybody introduce themselves and just give us an idea of why you're running? Just a very brief 60 seconds. Thank you. Brian, why don't you start?
Okay, great. Thank you. As was said, I'm the incumbent senator for much of this district with redistricting. The district includes Lower Manhattan, and which has been in the 26th Senate district, and some new territory in the northwest, basically in the West Village, and no more of Brooklyn, sadly. Although it's been a pleasure representing the existing district. As I said, I'm running for re-election. I'm chair of the Senate Housing Committee. And over the past few years, since the Senate took the majority, we really have been working to transform every aspect of our state's laws and policies in the budget and statutory realm. We have made huge strides in creating housing and tenant rights and in funding necessary affordability. We have made big changes in our laws around climate change, really creating a nation-leading set of laws around that. And most recently, I think particularly significantly, we've been transforming the gun laws, which is something I've played a big role in since I got into office, and just had the pleasure of debating the bill on the floor this past Friday that is intended to address the fact that the Supreme Court has ruled a key provision of our gun laws unconstitutional. I'm running because I think this is the best way to serve the many community. I assume we'll have questions, a lot of questions about our local issues today, but it's a pleasure to be with all of you and also to be with my two opponents in this race. So nice to see both of you as well.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Victoria?
Thank you, Michael. Thanks so much for having me today. It is great to see a lot of you. I am Vittoria Fariello. I'm running for state senate here in our district. I am a district leader in Lower Manhattan, where I've lived for nearly 25 years, raising 4 kids in Gateway Plaza. As a district leader, I changed the rules of the county committee that gave the nomination to our current state senator, despite the fact that members voted overwhelmingly for his opponent. I've testified and rallied with community members against the drilling of a toxic waste site at 250 Water Street and the violation of community-led zonings in our district, and not just at the Seaport, but also in Soho, NoHo, and other areas. I was arrested when trying to prevent the building of a mega jail in Chinatown. I've rallied, marched, and advocated on behalf of home attendant workers who were denied their wages and forced to work 24 hours. I've spearheaded the call for 100% affordable 5-World Trade Center and a lot more. I want to bring the power of elected office to our communities, so I would be incredibly honored to have your endorsement. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. And Daniela?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I am running because what happened to our city over the past few years. We have seen violence increasing tremendously. We have seen prolonged school closures that have drove so many families and students away. And now we're dealing with the aftermath of that, the budget cliff that our schools are facing. We saw taxpayers leaving. And I have seen very little of our elected officials doing anything to prevent or even mitigate all of these things happening. And I love New York City. I'm originally from Brazil. My husband's from Ukraine. And we feel so blessed every day to be raising our kids here, far from military dictatorship as my parents grew up, or as his family is now being bombarded by a tyrant. And so that's what I want to do. I really want to make sure that we can continue raising our kids here in this great city. I have worked with education for over a decade, creating school choice and helping families access schools that can really serve their children. And education has been my passport for a better life. I've been very lucky to have access to really high quality education here in the US, and that has completely transformed my life. And that's why I'm running. I want to make sure that every child in New York City has access to a great school, that we can keep families here, and that I can take this subway safely with my 2 boys again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniela. My colleague and the former president of New Downtown Dems, Patrick Cannell, will now ask some questions.
Everybody, we've allotted 6 minutes for questions from your moderators, from Michael and me. So I'm going to ask the candidates, each of you, the same questions, but I'm going to ask you to keep your answers to 60 seconds, given the short amount of time that we have for this component. We want to fit a lot of other things in as we get to know you and talk to you more. My first question for each of you is about crime, and specifically around folks who are not feeling as safe as they have in the past. And I'm wondering, what specifically can you do as a New York State Senator to combat the rise of crime in New York City? And we'll start with Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you for the question. First, I have throughout my time in public office worked hard to make sure that we do everything possible to keep people safe in New York. I work very closely with all of our police precincts to ensure that 2 things, which I think often some Democrats don't see as compatible. Our police need to be respectful of our communities in all of their dealings, and they also need to be responsive to our concerns that people remain safe. I have ensured that we do what we can to make sure there are resources available. I've also, as I mentioned before, played a big role in making sure that we keep gun crime in New York at the very low rate it is. We've had an uptick lately. Today, there was a good report from the police saying gun crime is down relative to last year. But New York State and New York City have among the lowest rates of gun-related death in America, partly because of our very effective laws. I'm very proud of the work I did starting a decade ago to make sure those are the strongest possible laws that we can have. And I look forward to continuing that work. And that's 60 seconds worth. I probably have more to say if there are a little more time.
Okay, let me just jump in for a moment, Patrick, and say if anybody has questions for the candidates, please put them in the chat and we'll try to answer them, get answers for you. Thank you, Patrick.
Thanks. Daniela?
So there are 3 things that I think should be a priority to make our city safe again. One is reviewing the bail reform and seeing what has worked, we should keep, but there's a lot that has not worked and we need to change. New York State now is the only state in the nation that does not allow judges to have discretion to keep people behind bars if they are deemed a danger to public safety. It's the only state that does not give the judges that discretion. And that is a mistake. We should change that. We also need to review the discovery laws, because if you talk with any police officer, they will tell you that it has made almost impossible for them to produce the evidence to be able to prosecute people who have committed crimes in our city. And finally, and I think sometimes the most important, is ensure that the DA is actually doing the job. The DA on the first month in his job wrote a memo about all the things that he will not prosecute. That's not his job to decide what is the law and what it's not. His job is to prosecute people to break the law. And the legislature has done nothing to make sure that there is an investigation and we can actually make sure we have a functioning DA. I want to point that Brian Kavanaugh said that there was a decrease in gun violence over the last year, but there was a huge increase before. And so it's a little bit misleading to say that there was a decrease last year, because we are seeing incredibly increase in gun violence, including in the playground behind my son's school. A mother was shot last week, a playground that he goes every day. And so no family feels safe in New York City these days, including my family.
Thanks. Victoria, your turn.
Thank you. So I first want to say that I share and understand the sense of fear of crime, and you know, I have small children as well, and hesitated to let our youngest take the subway when you know, when she wanted to go on her own to school. Having said that, I've spoken with a lot of police officers as well, and one of the things we really need to do is unburden our police of taking care of issues that are not theirs to take care of. That's homelessness, of people with mental health issues, and we need to fund the programs that have been proven to actually address these issues. There's a great program called Cahoots in Eugene, Oregon, that actually did where they have the mental health hospital paired up with the police. They work together in the same unit. And when a call comes in, they determine together who's best to go out and respond to these. This is really helpful too, because the police can't handle all these issues, but we want them to be able to focus on the crimes that are dangerous to us. So if we're able to alleviate the other questions that are really better left to social services or mental health providers, then we can help them do their job.
Thanks, Victoria. Okay, we'll go in reverse order this time. So Victoria, you'll take this question first, then Daniela, then Senator Kavanaugh. One of the largest, most important functions of a state legislator, whether in the Senate or in the Assembly, is the budget period. And I'd like to know what specifically are your top 3 priorities for the next year's budget and for generally in terms of how you would approach budgeting as a state senator.
Thank you. So housing. Honestly, housing obviously would be a huge priority. Everyone is being priced out of our city. Everyone is being pushed out at all different levels, income levels, and we can't let this continue to happen. We have to pass legislation that would actually create true affordable housing. And we also have to make sure that we have funds that go to, in particular, our public housing. NYCHA has suffered terribly, and you know, privatization is not the way to go. That is what has now been passed through legislature, and it's honestly quite disturbing that that's what we do. I also believe very much in the Health Care Act. New York Health Act is really important. That itself would help alleviate not just medical debt from individuals, but it helps small businesses that they don't have to carry the burden of providing health care. And of course, I also care a lot about transparency and oversight and accountability of our government agencies, particularly our state agencies, to the communities that they serve.
Thanks. Daniela?
So 50% of the state's budget is between education and healthcare. So I think that's really where my focus would be, making sure that that part of the budget really is well used and it translates into real services to the people of New York City in our district. New York City now spends more than $40,000 per student per year at New York City public schools, is more than double the national average. And still, we have seen this per pupil fund increasing every year over the last decade, and still we have horrible results. We have more than 80,000 students who have left the public school system over the last 2 years. So I really think that focusing on our spending education, it's the most important thing for our children, for our future, and to keep families here. I agree with housing. We desperately need more affordable housing, so that will definitely be a focus. And we need a package of tax incentives to bring business back. Our economy has suffered. We lost taxpayers. We are now looking at a budget cliff for the city. And so I really think that making sure that our economy is dynamic again, it's very, very important supporting small business.
Great. Thank you, Daniela. Brian?
I guess I'll start with housing also. I've been a very big proponent of this for a long time. I'm proud that this year's budget included $5.5 billion of new state capital spending, which is a very substantial increase over recent years. Actually, the largest number we've had in quite a while. I also am proud that we put $2.5 billion of operating money in, including $1 billion to cover something I've prioritized in the last 2 years, which is covering the rent of people who've been unable to afford their rent during COVID. Again, there's no state in America that's doing that even remotely at that scale. And we've had a $4 billion total spend on that, and we do need additional money that I'm fighting for from the federal government and perhaps from next year's state budget as well. I introduced something called Housing Access Vouchers, which is a program introduced in 2020, just before COVID. It is proposed to be a new program similar to Section 8, the federal program, that would be intended to house people who are otherwise homeless or at risk of losing their housing. It has become a priority of virtually every housing organization, as well as lots of the property owners in our city and state. It would be statewide, and the goal would be to get it up to at least $1 billion a year, housing about 200,000 people. And that would be at a scale that really would address our homelessness crisis, which is very much about services, but also about a lack of permanent affordable housing. That is a very big priority for me. It's top priority, I would say, going into next year's budget. On healthcare, I do support the New York Health Act. In the meantime, I think we need to make sure we adequately fund the existing programs that provide services for people who otherwise fall through into the gaps in existing programs. We took a big step there this year to try to cover people facing lack of healthcare because of their immigration status. And we need to do more with funding childcare. Again, we took a big step forward this year and began a meaningful state program to assist people providing childcare so that children can be taken care of while people are working. Also, people can get out into the workforce and ensure that their kids are in good, safe places and learning. But I want to revisit that and continue to do more to get that done.
Thanks, Brian. I'm going to turn it over to Michael, and we'll ask now some questions from our members.
So one question in the chat talks about 5 World Trade Center, and I'm going to make the assumption that all 3 of you think that there should be affordable housing at 5 World Trade Center. I think everybody would like to maximize the amount of affordable housing, and the question is, how can that be done? What programs could be in place that would make this happen? Let's start with Victoria.
Thank you so much. Of course, this is near and dear to my heart. We have been pushing for 100% affordability at 5 World Trade Center. And we actually commissioned a study, which has been the New York Trust Fund, Community Trust Fund has given us the money to do this. So that will be coming out very soon. And I would defer to the expert on this who drafted this, but I know that it's a combination of various programs that we have, Section 8, as well as an appropriation from the federal government. And there is money left over from 9/11 that we believe, when the LMDC was founded, one of their founding promises was to create affordability. And what has happened is we have lost thousands of affordable units in our district. And this is a real opportunity for us to start to make us whole, start to bring it back, and to particularly help out people who suffered through 9/11 and are continuing to suffer, are ill, and unfortunately many have passed away. So the programs, it's coming next week, I hope, and I look forward to sharing that with everyone.
Okay, thank you, Victoria. Brian, we have a question about what exactly do you consider to be affordable housing? A lot of these new developments offered affordable housing, however, affordable to whom? I couldn't afford an apartment outside of Section 8 with my salary, asked one of our guests. How would you answer that?
I'd like to take let me do that. The answer is that we need to have a set of programs that allow all people in our city to have a place to live. Housing ought to be considered a right, and for housing that is accessible to everyone should be the goal. That means a wide range of programs. Obviously, what is affordable to somebody who is making substantially more than the median income is going to be different than people who are earning very low income. Public housing provides a lot of housing for people at lower ends of the income, but also a lot of working people are working there. So maintaining the stability of public housing is critical. Maintaining the stability of our many Section 8 developments and making sure they're properly funded and maintained is critical. The program I mentioned that would be modeled on Section 8 would be a program that basically has people paying no more than 30% of their income toward their rent, and the program would pick up the rest. That is the model Section 8 that the questioner referred to. But we also need to expand the supply of housing. New York is not producing enough housing to keep up with demand, and that's one of the reasons the market is so tight, and that's one reason rents have been rising so rapidly. I've been pushing for a regional approach that would insist that the suburbs do more of their share. In Long Island, they only produce, in Nassau and Suffolk counties combined, they only produce 7 units per 1,000 residents, which means they are just not doing their share of housing people in the metropolitan area. I would note that one of the things that I am proudest of is changing the rent laws in 2019, basically passing the strongest set of tenant protections anywhere in America in maybe the last half century. Is a very broad bill. It eliminates all the loopholes in rent regulation to the extent, one of my colleagues just mentioned that we've lost affordable units in downtown. It's largely because of loopholes in that system. This district lost more rent stabilized housing than any other Senate district in the state. And this will basically eliminate all of that deregulation and give us a base such that all of our programs from here forward that are adding affordable will be creating a net increase in affordable housing. Over many, many years, as we added more affordable units at all levels, we were losing those through deregulation also at all levels. Rent stabilization protects a lot of people who are, in the upper middle income area, and also people who are making very little income. So that is still the baseline. We need to expand tenant protections in that program, and especially through good cause eviction, which allows people to be stabilized. And that's I guess that's part of the menu. There are a few other things to say as well, but I don't want to take up. That's certainly more than 60 seconds worth. So let me yield the floor.
Thank you. And of course, Senator Kavanaugh is the chair of the Housing Committee in the state Senate. Daniela, homeless and housing, how would you solve that problem?
Yes, so I agree. We need more supply of housing, and I think we need to be very creative, bringing the private sector and the public sector together. We need a new effort as Mitchell-Lama program to really make sure that we are providing more affordable housing in our district. The issue of homeless, I think it's very important to also be considering with the issue of crime and with the issue of addiction. Just today, I was visiting a facility that is, award-winning, that really is a fantastic facility for people who are in recovery. And when I asked them what was the hardest thing that they are facing, they said, New York City now, it's an open air drug market, right? So when our clients go out, even for a walk, people are offering them drugs, and that has made their recovery much, much harder. So I really think that making sure that we're not making this available for people, because then make their lives much more unstable and much harder in their recovery. It's very, very important. And for that, we need to control crime and all of the other things that I mentioned before.
Thank you, Daniela. Now we're in the section of our forum where we're going to ask each candidate to ask one question to one candidate. Daniela, why don't you start? Ask one question to one of the candidates.
Yes, I would like to ask Senator Kavanaugh, what have you done over the past 2 years to help our children receive a high quality education in New York City? As I mentioned, our schools were closed, some for the longest in the country. That has had a huge impact on families living in New York City, women live in the workforce. And now we are facing this budget cliff that, the school of my son is facing now a 30% budget reduction, because you cannot lose almost 100,000 students on a period of 3 years and then think that your budget will stay the same. And the only thing we have heard from Albany is more and more money, higher per pupil funding, but not actually solving the problems of closure, of elimination of merit, and the quality of education.
And may I ask each candidate to just ask the question and not make a speech? Brian, you're next.
That was a thorough question, and I
Please answer
appreciate
the
it.
question.
I think, Daniela, who has a great deal of expertise in a lot of this, is not wrong that we need more accountability, but to suggest that somehow the state is doing some disservice by only talking about money, first of all, is not true. And second of all, money really is critical. We have many years ago, we had the Campaign for Fiscal Equity, which found that the state had an obligation to ensure that everybody had a basic quality, sound education. And New York is now delivering on that. We are increasing funding for New York City schools to the largest level in history by a long shot. And we are, I think that is a very significant thing. The budget cuts that are going on now are a function of this mayoral administration and the city council deciding to fully implement a provision in existing law, which says that when the number of students go down, the amount of money for that school declines. The number of students has gone down because of many things, including the dynamics of COVID. I think that's a mistake. That is not a function of state law. And again, the city, I think has made a mistake in spite of us giving them unprecedented amounts of money in cutting services. We implemented pre-K. It's been a few years ago, and you heard about it, endlessly from Bill de Blasio. But it is, I think, significant to note that we authorized that and created that throughout New York City. And so that's, having every 4-year-old have a seat for full-time pre-K has been a significant boon for folks. We do need to continue to make sure that our schools are functioning effectively. It has been, as has been noted, an extraordinarily difficult time. I work closely with the people who work in our schools, including the union that represents the principals and the teachers, both of which have endorsed me in this race. And I'll continue to do that. And I also meet with our school officials in each of our schools to figure out what I can do locally, and have been helpful and sometimes in solving particular problems they have.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Now, do you have a question for another candidate, Brian?
Daniela, you've talked about discretion for judges. You mentioned it before, and I often when crime in New York is covered, when judges exercise discretion to not impose bail where they could, or to allow somebody out because they allow somebody out who they could have held, there's a lot of criticism exercising that discretion. And in other cases, people are telling us we should give judges more discretion. Just how do you square that? Like, what is your take, recognizing that you're raising important issues about safety in our communities? But we passed a law that says if you're not a repeat offender of minor crimes, and you haven't committed a violent, serious crime, we shouldn't hold you because you don't have cash. So you've been critical of that. Can you just talk a little bit more about your vision for how pre-trial detention should work?
Daniela, may I ask you for a short answer to the long question? Thank you.
That is a very complicated question, but it's very basic. When the DA is lowering every single offense, and any police officer in New York City is going to tell you that, even if you commit a violent crime, you go to the DA, it's going to be lower, right? The judges do not have the tools to keep people who are a clear threat to public safety behind bars. And you don't need more than looking at some of the really high-profile cases over the past 6 months. These are people who are repeated offenders, who have been arrested and released multiple times, like more than 10 times, right? And everybody knew, everybody has been involved in the system, knew these people are going to commit other crimes. They are clear threats to public safety. And they go on a pattern of escalating crime until they actually murder somebody, and then you cannot hide that, and then they stay behind bars. So I do think that when the DA is doing actually his job, and the governor has a lot of, they can do an investigation, remove the DA. It's not like California that we need to have a vote on that. The legislature should work with the governor on that, and then we can have a conversation about the judge discretion. But I still think that's the job of the judge, is to judge a situation, right? You cannot completely remove discretion. We have some of the most liberal judges in New York City. I trust them that they are not going to be keeping people behind bars for small petty crimes. That's not what any of us want. But between what's happening in other states, that I think none of us would sign up for that, and what is happening now in New York City, that is like you can commit any crime.
Thank you, Daniela. Thank you. Thank you very much. Victoria, you're sitting there alone. Do you have a question for a candidate?
Sure, I will ask Senator Kavanaugh. I have a question for you. So there have been a number of judicial proceedings that have found entities as well as organizations to be liable for having stolen wages from home attendants. So my simple question to you is, would you support withholding funds from these agencies and these companies until they have fully paid back their wages?
So for context, the reference is to the home care workers, including organizations like CPC, which does a fantastic job serving our community. And there have been some proceedings where workers represented by their unions have asserted that they've been underpaid relative to the existing rules. And a small but meaningful percentage have demonstrated that they were not paid adequate wages. And yes, that money should be repaid promptly by these organizations. And my understanding is that the organizations are in the process of doing that. The larger issue is that we need to adequately fund, if people need 24-hour care, we need to adequately fund it. And I also have signed on to legislative proposals that would address that comprehensively. And it has to be a budget issue. And I've advocated for it to be addressed by the state budget. So I do support resolving it. And again, agencies have an obligation to pay their workers, and I think settling those cases and paying the workers is critical, and I do support that as well.
Okay, Patrick, it's your turn.
Thanks. So we just have a quick lightning round. We actually have maybe just a minute or so left. And it's really just meant to get to know you a little bit better, our personal level candidates, and to just give us short, one word or, quick answers. So let's start with Victoria, and I'll ask each of you the same question. What's the last book you read?
The last book I read? Oh,
Yeah.
My problem is I start books and don't finish them. So let me see. So I started reading Gotham.
There's your answer.
So there you go.
Brian?
I just picked up a book that raises the question of how we ought to price wind power. It's by a guy named David Hughes, who's an anthropology professor at Rutgers.
That'll put you to sleep. Daniela?
I'm reading Wild Robot with my son every night. And for myself, I'm reading San Francisco about the homeless and addiction crisis in California.
Favorite place to
Patrick,
travel?
you got to give the wind a chance, Patrick.
I will. You're right. Wasn't very fair of me. Favorite place to travel, Victoria?
Well, I guess we'll take Italy out of the picture, right?
Almost
Actually,
expected that to be yours.
Chinatown. Chinatown.
Daniela?
Brazil for vacation.
Yes. Brian?
I actually love Italy and Spain, but my father immigrated from Ireland, and I spent summers in the Northwest Ireland in the Republic, and it's still among my favorite places in the world.
That's pretty neat. Favorite restaurant in Senate District 27? Brian, go ahead. Favorite restaurant in the district? Brian.
Sorry, who are we? Oh, okay. I didn't hear you call. I'm going to say at the moment Veselka, partly out of a great opportunity to support the Ukrainian cause as well.
Daniela?
I have to say the Gino Trattoria because it's where we eat pizza every Sunday with my boys here near home.
Victoria?
Hands down to Claudio. If you haven't gone, you gotta
go. Do you own a bike, Victoria?
No, I have city bike.
Okay.
My
Daniela?
kids have bikes.
Yes, I
Daniela?
do have a bike.
And Brian?
Yes, it's a small foldable bike that it's the fact that it's foldable is the only difference than a bike that I would have had when I was 12. It's a foot brake and a single speed and a 20-inch wheel.
Okay. We are at time. We're actually a little bit over. So thank you to Senator Kavanaugh, to Victoria, to Daniela for hanging out with us for an extra little bit. I'll turn it right back over to Michael. And thank you so much, guys.